I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, how has the world changed? My God. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, Putin was demonized. Russia was demonized. European Union was pretty much saying they want nothing to do with Russia. And now we have Vladimir Putin. I mean, he's all over Europe now, and everyone is hosting him. And lo and behold, he ends up at Fort Brégançon, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is the official summer residence of none other than the French President Emmanuel Macron. And, Macron, he was just saying all kinds of good things about Putin, the multipolar world and this new multipolar environment that we're heading into. And it just, stuck with me. Things have really, really changed. And of course, the things that have changed, and you'll go much more into depth on this, to me is Syria, Ukraine, all these things that it seems, 4 or 5 years ago when they were, talking down to Putin about, it looks like he was right at the end of the day as to all of these geopolitical issues.
Well, indeed. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I can so well remember how at the end, in the late autumn of 2017, as the war fighting in Syria was escalating, there was this huge media campaign against Putin in France. And he had to call off a visit to France at that time because Hollande was talking about, indicting, going after Putin for war crimes. I mean, I can remember people were talking in that kind of way. And now, as you rightly say, Putin and Russia stand on the brink of victory in Syria. There's been an election in Ukraine, which has brought to power someone who at least is talking about having peace in Ukraine. And he is, of course, being invited by the French president, the new French president, Emmanuel Macron, to Emmanuel Macron's official summer residence in the south of France at Fort Brégançon. And it is an extraordinary change, but you have to look at why the reasons for this are happening. And it's a very, very interesting press conference that the two men, Macron and Putin, gave. And it showed to me how radically different the perspectives of the two men are. Because Macron, his agenda, as far as I could see, was quite clear. He was trying to emphasize to Putin relentlessly. I mean, he went on and on. He was harping on about this, about Russia being a European country. In other words, Russia attaching itself to Europe, accepting European norms and European rules. And it's important to stress that when Macron talks about European norms and European rules, he means European Union rules and norms, not necessarily what you and I would consider to be European norms and rules. And it's quite clear that he wants to do that because he's becoming increasingly concerned that the Russians are starting to think of themselves less as Europeans, more as Eurasians, and are starting to create this alliance. And I think more and more people are now calling it an alliance with China. And for Macron, as well as for other people in Europe, this is a nightmare which they have, of course, themselves largely created. And they are trying as hard as they can, and in whatever way they can, to get Putin and the Russians to change their policy on this. But here is the problem. Though they talk about better relations with Russia, they don't actually concede anything of substance. They don't agree, for example, that Putin was right on Syria, even if they grudgingly admit that. They don't offer an obvious solution to the Ukrainian crisis, which addresses Russian concerns. They don't really address themselves to the question of sanctions, the sanctions the European Union has imposed on Russia. It all comes down to this general talk all the time about how Russia is supposedly a European country and therefore should align itself with us against the Chinese.
Yeah, empty rhetoric, just empty words, isn't it? But I mean, they are ass kissing. I mean, Macron was ass kissing. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely, to an extraordinary degree. I mean, to a degree that that made my eyes pop out when I read the transcripts of the two men's comments. I mean, it was just extraordinary. But the very interesting thing is, of course, that Putin that was listening to all of this, and he was sort of hearing it, and he was quietly maneuvering to get all the best for Russia that he could from it. But he wasn't giving an inch either. And there were actually some rather tense moments because, I mean, for example, there's this moment when Macron goes on and on about, how Russia is part of this great European space that extends all the way from the Atlantic to
Vladivostok to Lisbon.
Lisbon, exactly. And Putin said, well, that wasn't our opinion. This originates with something that General de Gaulle once said, not us. He was very, very careful not to rise to this bait about Russia being a European country or having its soul in Europe. I mean, he must have found this all extremely condescending. And then, of course, there was this absolutely, I thought, farcical moment at the end, which I sent to you. I sent to you the transcript in which Putin is asked a question about this protest, this election protest in Moscow. And he says, well, we have protests in Moscow and we deal with them in a lawful way and they're usually peaceful, but the police will act. And look at the situation in France with the yellow vests, where, as we know, there's been enormous police violence against protesters in France. And then Macron starts off on this long, tedious explanation about how the protesters in France only attract the attention of the police when they break the law, and that France has all these rules and rights that allow free expression under its constitution and its laws and all the rest, and how that's somehow different from Russia. And then Putin just comes in and says, well, actually, it's no different at all, because if people want to protest lawfully in Russia, they can. And they did on two occasions, one in July, one in August. And when they break the law, that's when the police come in and become involved, though obviously not on the scale of what's happened in France. And then Macron, obviously very embarrassed at that point, ends the whole discussion and says, right, okay, we've spoken now. Let's back off and get to work. It was very, very, very funny, actually, at least to me.
It is funny. What do you make of it's sneaky? What do you make of sneaky Macron? Let's call him sneaky Macron. What do you make of him? Kind of okay. He was definitely, kissing Putin's ass and trying to somehow pull Russia into the EU orbit, which obviously it's never going to happen. But it shows a nervousness.
Yes.
In the European Union, the elites of the European Union who are giving Macron his marching orders, because Macron is not doing this, under his own will. He's getting orders from above, and they're giving him these orders to try and sway Putin and Russia away from China, bring them into the EU fold. But on the flip side, sneaky Macron was also taking jabs at the United States and Trump every time he was invoking this multipolar world order.
Oh, yes.
And he was saying many things in the transcript that he wasn't calling the U.S. out by name and Trump by name, but he was inferring Trump in the United States. Can you comment on that as well? Because you could see Macron playing off both sides.
Absolutely. And of course, this is what I found so, extraordinary about this. And what it showed to me is, yes, the European elites are becoming increasingly nervous about the Russian-Chinese alliance, and they want to detach Russia from China. And that was the strategy behind this meeting. And the European elites are also extremely nervous about what's going on in the United States and about how Donald Trump is increasingly taking decisions which they don't like on all kinds of factors. I mean, the JCPOA, that's the deal with Iran, unilateral policies in the Middle East, but also on economics, on tariffs, on all kinds of things. And as you correctly say, Macron's comments were full of snide references against the United States and against Donald Trump. But what it all reminded me of, as you said, all this, bootlicking of Putin, was the early Macron, who was bootlicking, if you remember, with Donald Trump. When he became president of France, he was dashing off to Washington. He was talking to Trump. He was constantly giving this impression that he was, going to be this great friend of Trump's, that the the British-American special relationship was going to be replaced with a French-American special relationship. And as we know, Donald Trump didn't take any of that seriously and just went ahead and made his own decisions. Now, Putin is a much more polite person than Donald Trump is. And in some ways, he is a consummate diplomat. So he's not going to snub Macron in quite the same brutal way that Trump did. But he's going to be as unimpressed by Macron's sycophancy as Trump was. Macron is incredibly vain and conceited if he thinks that by showering people with these kind of compliments, he's going to change them from their course. And I'm going to say something, this endless harping about Russia being a European country, and this invoking of people like Turgenev and Stravinsky and Dostoevsky and Nabokov, all these Russian writers. The Russians will find that extremely condescending. Far from being impressed by it, they will be irritated by it.
Alexander, let me read you an opinion piece by John Laughlin that you sent to me on RT. And I'm going to read you a quote and we can wrap it up on this quote. I want to get your opinion on it. President Macron went further, even saying that the main problem in the world is no longer Russia, but instead the United States. You have to read between the lines, but here's the key quote. I would like to say that today the world is living through a historical moment. The multilateral approach is often criticized, and we should think about ways to rebuild this world and this order. This means we should look for new cooperation mechanisms that will be useful to all of us. In this case, in this context, our bilateral relations, as well as relations between Russia and the European Union, play a key and determinative role. I am thinking about everything that has happened over the past few decades, what has managed to drive us apart. I know that Russia is a European country in its heart of hearts, and we believe in a Europe that spreads from Lisbon to Vladivostok. Alexander, I forgot to mention the title of this piece by John Laughlin is Putin-Macron Meeting Heralds Glorious Summer After Long Winter of Discontent. Would you like to comment on this quote by Macron?
Yes. Well, first of all, that basically sums up Macron's agenda. He doesn't like the Americans very much because they do all these unilateral policies that he doesn't care about, and they pursue this policy of unilateralism and exceptionalism, which, let us remember, the Europeans were heavily colluding with. They supported the United States during the so-called unipolar moment when the United States appeared to be the so-called hyperpower. They were involved with all the US's various ventures in Yugoslavia, in Libya, in all sorts of places, in Syria, Jacques Chirac held out against the war in Iraq, but in all other respects, the Europeans were fully on board with all of this. Now that it's hurting them, they're looking to others. They're looking to the Russians first and foremost because they don't really like or trust the Chinese. There is no way, it is far too late for the Europeans to break this association between the Russians and the Chinese. The Russians and the Chinese are now committed to that relationship, and they understand very well that it is having this relationship which gives them leverage. It gives Putin leverage when he speaks to Macron. Macron would not be talking to Putin in the way that he is now talking to Putin if Putin didn't have China at his back. And the same applies, will increasingly apply in the dialogue between the Chinese and the US. The fact that the Chinese have the Russians at their back will help them with the Americans and with others. But there's something else here, and this is where I have to come back to John Laughling's description. John Laughlin is one of my favorite analysts. He is somebody I like very much. We are well acquainted. I think the world of him. But I'm afraid I don't think that we are going from a winter of discontent into a great summer of happy relations between the European Union and the Russians. Because at the end of the day, Macron was not coming up with anything concrete. What the Russians will say to Macron is, look, you've helped us to get back our membership, our full membership in the Council of Europe. But that's a token thing. We want something concrete now. So what are you going to do? Are you going to lift the sanctions against us? Are you really going to help to bring about a peaceful settlement in Ukraine? Are you going to pressure Zelensky? Are you going to tone down the radicals in Ukraine? Are you going to renegotiate the economic agreements between Ukraine and the European Union, which are the source of that crisis in the first place? What are you going to do about the ballistic missile interceptors that the United States has planted in Eastern Europe, in European Union territory? Are you going to continue to work with us on energy projects? Are you going to, over and beyond Nord Stream 2? Are you going to do away with the third energy package, which has restricted Russian gas companies, Gazprom's operations within the European Union? Are you going to do any of these things? And that's going to be the test for the Russians at the end of the day. If the Europeans want a situation with the Russians in which their relations with Russians are normalized and become friendly again, even if that doesn't lead to a break in this alliance between Russia and China, which is now unbreakable, but if they want good relations with the Russians, fair relations with the Russians, they have to go beyond words. They have to go beyond talk about Russia being a European country. They have to stop lecturing the Russians about protests, how to run protests in their own country. And it isn't enough to go on talking about Turgenev and Dostoevsky and Stravinsky and all these people. They have to do certain very positive and very real things. That's what the Russians will be looking for. And at this moment in time, Macron is not offering any of that. Will he do it? We will see. I don't think so.
He won't do it, but it's the European Union, it's Macron getting squeezed by Russia and China on the one end, and then by Trump in the United States on the other end. And they're just squeezing Macron, and they're going to pop him like the little pimple that he is. And he knows it. He knows it, because if Obama was president, he would not be bootlicking Russia.
No, of course not.
And China, and he wouldn't be looking there.
Exactly.
But now that you have Trump, it's a whole different scenario.
Absolutely. Of course. That's exactly right. That is exactly correct. As I said, when they had Obama and Clinton, they were very happily along with all the terrible things that the United States was doing in those days. So bomb Serbia, we will bomb Serbia with you. Bomb Libya, we will bomb Libya with you. When it's Donald Trump and they don't like him, they go and talk to Putin and they try and detach him, as I said, for his new friends in Beijing. As I said, he's not interested. He will improve relations. The Russians want better relations with Europe, but they will insist upon their economic and geostrategic concerns and interests being taken into proper account. No sign for the moment that the Europeans are prepared to do any of those things. And all this talk, as I said, about Russia being at heart and soul a European country will just annoy them.
Just a bunch of bollocks.
Exactly. Well, it is. It is.
A bunch of bollocks.
It is. Absolutely. I mean, it is. It's absolutely.
And Putin knows it.
And Putin knows it. He knows it very well. And as I said, to lecture Putin on his own country and his own history and his own writers, about which Putin, by the way, who's a very erudite man, is very well informed, knows far more about these things than Macron does. As I said, it must come over to the Russians and to Putin personally as so patronizing and condescending that, as I say, it can only irritate him. So it would have been better, actually, if Macron hadn't done that. What the Russians like when they deal with people is somebody who deals in a very straightforward way and addresses actual, real problems. That's not what they're getting with Macron at the moment. Having said that, Putin always works in Russia's interests. He obviously prefers a Macron and a Europe that is sweet-talking him to a Europe that is positively hostile to Russia. Because, as he was careful to point out, the French are now investing increasingly in the Russian economy. These economic links, which are useful to the Russians, are taking place. And if having a dialogue with Macron means that the Europeans don't impose more sanctions or deploy more troops or create more trouble in places like Ukraine, well, that's in Russia's interest. So why not go along with it?
All right. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to make sure you get notifications every time we push out a new video. And follow us on iTunes and on Soundcloud to get an audio copy of this video as well. And please donate to the channel, PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. The links are in the description box down below. And of course, go to the Duran shop, pick up polos, pick up t-shirts, pick up magic mugs to increase your geopolitical IQ, like the magic mug that Alexander is holding and just showed you and is showing you again right now.
Exactly. And since we're talking about Putin, I would point out that this is the same symbol, the state symbol of Russia, that he has on his mugs. Alex has it too, as he showed at the G20 summit just a few weeks ago. So if you want to drink from the same kind of cup that Putin drinks from, you can buy one of our Duran mugs. I'm going to make a guess, actually. I think this is probably a better mug than the one that Putin drinks from, because the Kremlin apparently goes in for rather, ordinary porcelain, whereas this is absolutely top quality. It's I know a fair amount about porcelain. This is a wonderful, beautiful porcelain body. It's got wonderful luster. It feels firm and strong. It's perfect to drink from. I'm drinking, by the way, green tea from it today, just for people to know. And of course, we have lots of mugs like it, and it's a fantastic mug. And you have mugs like this one with the old Moscow symbol with St. George slaying the dragon of fake news and untruth, as we do all the time on the Duran. This is the mug with the Alpha Force, Russia's elite special forces unit. There are lots of wonderful mugs on our shop. in our shop. And we have lots of other things in our shop. We have shirts, polo shirts like this one. And you can see our own Duran double-headed eagle there, which is different from the Russian, by the way. It points to the east and the west, something which Macron doesn't seem able to do. He thinks only of Europe. He has this absurd Eurocentrism, which is becoming so out of date nowadays. But it was all evident in that press conference. But we are not Eurocentrists at all. We think globally, and I don't mean, as globalists. It means that we look at the whole world and we understand geopolitics right across it. And it's of this amazing polo shirt, 100% cotton, beautifully cut, perfectly dyed, wonderful color, incredibly comfortable, marvelous to wear on this very changeable weather we've been having in London. You look stylish in it, you feel great in it. It helps you to concentrate on all this difficult geopolitical analysis that we do. And if you want to look stylish, feel elegant, you can go to our shop, buy mugs like this, wear shirts like this, or wear other kinds of shirts. We have t-shirts, we have long sleeve shirts, we got hoodies, we got hats, we got stickers, we got wonderful things. Go to our shop, help the Duran, help yourself. Alex will tell you how.
Just look in the description box down below and you'll see a link to the duranshop.com. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.